Randy! The guy rang and knocked. You didn't hear him?
Hey. I thought you'd call me on the phone.
Sorry, they let me in.
Perfectly all right.
Okay, good. Nice to meet you. Okay, then.
Hey, I'm Jeffrey Masters, and as I've dug deeper into queer history, one of the things I've become particularly fascinated by is the period right before the Stonewall Uprising. By now, I know that you know what happened at Stonewall, but one of the things that came out of that was that it sent this signal to queer people that said that this thing that makes you different, this thing that you're hiding, not only is it something to not be ashamed of, but it is worth fighting for. Stonewall sent up this bat signal across the US, and it changed how queer people saw themselves. And looking at that pre-Stonewall history, one of the names that continues to come up is Randy Wicker. Randy joined the Mattachine Society in 1958. Mattachine was one of the first gay civil rights organizations in the US. And throughout the 1960s, Randy was one of the most visible gay activists in the country. He was part of some of the first radio interviews about gay people. He did television. He planned and led what's considered the first public pro-gay protest in the US. And he also famously was part of the sip-in at Julius, the bar here in New York City. That was 1966. Now, Julius is now a famous gay bar, but at the time, it was illegal to serve known or even suspected homosexuals. If they did, they could lose their liquor licenses. Following this sip-in and the resulting protest, the lawsuit that came out of this went all the way up to the New York State Supreme Court, and they found that yes, it was indeed discriminatory and unconstitutional to deny service to gay people. And then lastly, on top of all of that, Randy also shared his home with Marsha P. Johnson, the now famous icon of trans history. As you'll hear, he offered her a place to sleep one cold, wintry night. They hit it off, and she ended up staying with him for over a decade. So without further ado, this is LGBT Q&A with the now 86-year-old activist, Randy Wicker. So I want to start with the Mattachine Society, which you joined in 1958 while you were still a college student. What made you want to seek them out and join that group?
Well, I had read a book called The Heart in Exile. That's how I came out. And then I heard about the Mattachine, and I found a magazine on the newsstand. And of course, the minute I knew there was movement, I wanted to join it, which not many people wanted to do. I went up and I had to lie and say that I was 21, and I was only 20, 1958, to get in. And I think I was the 16th member. And at that time, whenever I would mention Mattachine to people in bars, it was amazing how it's frightening when you start seeing how people can be brainwashed by the society. I mean, there were all kinds of levels. They were against any kind of organization. I don't want to be associated with that dyke over there, or that screaming queen, or isn't it wonderful having this atmosphere, this underground atmosphere of these bars? And they used to call me Miss Mattachine and make fun of me.
Really?
And
so they were against organizing because they liked the underground nature of gay life?
They just didn't want to be associated. It was all a matter of blue-collar worker. It was on that level as well. They didn't want to be associated with some screaming black queen or some Spanish person.
Wow.
You know.
You were the 16th member of Mattachine.
Right.
Your first meeting, was there like 16 people there?
Oh, no. That was the number they had.
Oh.
If you had 16 people in the organization, you had 4 or 5 real activists. That's always the case. But the whole movement when I say didn't have over 100 real activists in it. And the thing that was so depressing about it, the kind of crunched in, trapped feeling of gay people from the 50s, very depressing, because then when they get to discussing things in your meeting, they wanted to hear preachers or ministers telling them why they weren't sinners, or were they sinners, or aren't we sinners? Are we sick, or aren't we sick?
One of the questions I had about this time, it's the 1950s. People are staying in the closet because of shame, fear, many societal factors. Why did you not succumb to those things?
Well, I didn't want anyone to know I was gay. And also I found out people didn't think I was gay. In other words, I call myself, I shouldn't use this term because it's a what do you call something that doesn't exist, a normal homosexual. In other words, that I pass. My father told me you don't hold books like this. That's the way girls hold books. You hold them like that. And so I had all the mannerisms.
So when you realized you were gay, it didn't bother you, for lack of better words?
Not at all, because I was raised Roman Catholic. I'm a confirmed Roman Catholic because I didn't dare tell the family I was an atheist. But I stood by a big tree at the age of 7 and said, they say I'm now age of reason, which means if I don't go to Holy Communion or don't go to church on Sunday or something, I'll burn in hell forever. And I thought, do I believe that? And I said, no, it doesn't make any sense to me. But I had a boy when I was in college, right as I was graduating, and he said to me one morning something, it's funny, it stuck in my mind because no one else had ever said that to me. He said, I woke up this morning and I desired you. And at the time I thought, well, it's strange, but it's kind of complimentary, right?
Yeah.
Well, 6 weeks after I left school, he committed suicide. And I realized that what it was when he said, I woke up this morning and I desired you, he felt guilty. And because I was ebullient and happy and having a great ball, I guess people hide their guilt from you the way.
And you were guilt-free.
I was guilt-free, and he wasn't. And I realized that when he said that to me, that was because it was so funny that one thing he did stuck in my mind. And when he committed suicide, all of a sudden it hit me. He was making a confession. And that's what it was like in the 50s. I mean, I got tired of the gay movement. I left the movement after a few years. If you read the book, The
Deviant's War, Eric Cervini.
I was literally the opposite of Franklin Kameny. I was the one that was pushing the envelope, and I can tell you there are letters that were written by organizations on the West Coast when I was going on radio and TV that were saying, why are you letting this person, Randy Wicker, go on radio and TV? He has no authority to speak. Well, I'm sorry. I believe that we homosexuals are our authorities on ourselves, not psychiatrists. They want to wait till they got the approval of psychiatrists and psychologists before they even showed their face on television. I broke into radio. I gave people a voice. I was the first one on TV, first one to publicly demonstrate at the Army Induction Center. I had a sip-in at Julius's with other members of Mattachine, which actually laid the groundwork for having legal gay bars.
I want to get into all that for sure. And so Mattachine Society, one of the early gay organizations in the U.S., what kind of work were they doing back then? What were their goals?
Nobody was interested in Mattachine. But once they got arrested, who did they call? They'd call the Mattachine office looking for legal help or no one trying to find a lawyer to defend them. And it's like they were all users, takers. Nobody was working to build something.
But internally, though, you were not there just to provide legal services.
No, I was there to change society's attitudes. And even if officially you were mentally ill, according to all the psychiatrists, and you were a big sinner, all those things going against you. My father told me when he told me he wanted me to be the best adjusted homosexual I could be because he wouldn't always be here to protect me. And so the whole idea was that homosexuals were all screaming queens, effeminate. You would think that people would know better, but they didn't.
Going back to your dad, though, he told you, I'm fully supportive of you, do what you want, but he also requested that you don't use your family name.
He read my diary. So apparently he went to an informed psychiatrist who told him, your son is always going to be this way. And he wanted me to be the first college-educated person in the family. So when I took him Mattachine literature, so when he read the literature, he said two things to me. He said, I don't think you're going to get far with this. That's the first statement. The second one is, just do me one favor, will you? And I said, what's that? He said, don't involve my good name. Now, he was Charles Gervin Hayden Sr., and I was Charles Gervin Hayden Jr., and that was the moment that Randy Wicker was born. I worked at a bank with a girl who liked the name Wicker. I thought it was sort of fun because it was kind of like Wicket. And then I saw a movie with Zachary Scott playing Randolph, and Randolph had a cloak. And I thought, there's a quality name if I ever heard one.
So did that embolden you taking on this new name to kind of like reinvent yourself? Like you were a very public person. Did that give you like permission to be so public?
Yes, I very much felt like Clark Kent ducking into the booth and coming out as, was it Superman or Batman he turned into?
Superman, yeah. But seriously, you
oh,
did.
Yeah, I was like a split identity. Charles Gervin Hayden Jr. was my 9-to-5 Social Security name. Then I worked at these jobs like in an advertising agency, in which I hated. Finally, what happened is the gay movement started to get very boring because I was tired of trying to talk them into having a public demonstration. So that a small group of activists in Mattachine, including people like Craig Rodwell, and I did, we wanted to go demonstrate at the Army Induction Center, mainly against this whole thing of giving people dishonorable discharges.
So this is known as like the first gay like protest or picket in the U.S. that we know of. And
yet they don't know that I was really very against the draft. I still am.
Yeah.
I don't believe that any government has the right to draft you and make you go fight a war, like the war in Vietnam, that you disapprove of.
But I think that for like the first known protest or picket in the U.S., it does stand out that it is about the military out of like all the other issues. Like was there a reason?
And you know what was bad about it? We had our leaflets. We had 2 leaflets, and we had our little demonstration. Nobody got mad. Nobody said, are you crazy? Nobody cussed us out. No reaction at all. It was just like, we almost weren't even there. If you'd asked me that night, I would have said it was a flop. And I thought it was a flop for 20 years. When I found that it wasn't, it was when I read Kayla Hoosen's listing of public demonstrations for gay rights in the United States. Only 20 years later, in 1988, did I realize that I actually made history.
Wow. So something that did get a ton of attention, though, was when you were on the radio in 1962.
Yeah, and I broke into the radio because they tried to revoke WBI's license. They challenged a religious group saying they were putting perverts on the air, and the Federal Communications Commission said homosexuality was a legitimate issue for discussion on the airways.
And that is a huge change.
So everybody then wanted a homosexual. So they all came to Mattachine, and I was the only one that, because I was young, I had nothing to lose. These other people had careers. If their voice was recognized, they'd lose their job.
And just for the audience to know, like when you were on the radio, it was a panel of gay men talking about gay life.
Yeah.
You organized this. And it was the first time that anything like that had ever aired on radio.
I played baseball. I didn't play football. I was too light and they wouldn't let me on the team. I happened to have crushes on some of the football players, but besides the point. I happen to be an ex-hot rod fanatic and a current sports car fanatic. These things are not usually common or thought to be common to homosexuals, but I find that there isn't that much difference. I find that the majority aren't this sissified.
Society, the civilization in which we live, for example, tries to set up these artificial differences. For example, they set up very rigid codes regarding you. For example, as far as I know, the act of sodomy is a crime, soliciting is a crime, is it not? A misdemeanor. Various other homosexual practices are scorned on by the law.
And so you convinced the station to air it. They did this, and the media response was tremendous. It was in the New York Times,
yes.
Newsweek, Variety, and it was largely positive, right?
Oh, yes. The Newsweek was a full page called Minority Listening. And the New York Times said it was a provocative, interesting program because people had never heard anything like this discussed among people that were homosexuals. One was a bisexual. There was an interracial couple.
And so you went to the radio station, WBAI,
right? Because I heard these shrinks promising that in 6 sessions they could cure homosexuality.
And thankfully, the radio station agreed with you that they should air what you said about gay men talking about gay issues. But I guess my question is, but this was you acting alone, right? This was not like the Mattachine, like hearing this radio program and targeting them.
I had my little cards printed up. It said, as a matter of fact, the funny thing, it was the way I really got the publicity. A week before the program, this guy named Jack O'Brien in the right-wing paper said that WBAI was having a 6-man or something panel discussing homosexuality, and a card-carrying swish, that's me, came and changed those letters to W-S-I-C-K. So I took that clipping a week ahead of time, and I went in person. I remember, it's so funny, I went to the New York Times, and what they did, which I've never had this experience since, a reporter came out, and first the old man at the counter reads my card and says, "Does this card mean what it says? What it says?" I said, "Of course, what else would my card mean?" You know what I mean? So he calls the news desk, and the guy comes out, and he takes me into this closet. Now, the closet's about, bigger, easily roomy for 2 people to be in, but, like a larger closet. And I give him the whole spiel about what we're doing. And that was all that happened there. And the other places, I went to Newsweek, I went to Variety, I went to every paper in the country.
To make sure that they'd be listening and would cover this.
I knew that this was a breakthrough. I didn't realize how big a breakthrough, because that paved the way for everything else.
I mean, to have the FCC change the rules to allow more of this, it's a huge
moment. They didn't change the rules because they simply interpreted the rules. People considered the general opinion was that this was too hot an issue to touch.
Oh, sorry. So they clarified the rules to say
you
they
sort of gave a ruling on the issue.
And so you started doing a lot of media appearances after this. Did you feel comfortable doing all that press and being so visible of a gay person in the 60s?
Yeah, because it was exciting. I went to City College and had 300 or 400 kids show up because no one had ever seen a homosexual before. I could see some pretty little queens sitting in the first row. But this is why you won't hear much of me about in the old proper books on gay history. I'm the bad boy of the gay movement. Politically, I moved from being a democratic socialist who supported Castro, literally up until the point that he started putting homosexuals in jail. That was the biggest wake-up in my life. That was not what I was. So I'm saying I was a democratic socialist, enrolled liberal. Then I became a Democrat, liberal Democrat. And then I got into business selling the protest buttons. I made a lot of money. I very much believe in self-employment. That's what made me free, to be self-employed. And it's very important that I created, once I knew how to run a retail business, I switched from buttons to antiques to ended up in Art Deco lighting, but still I had the power to hire people, and that included AIDS activists that were perfectly healthy. They couldn't work on the books because if they did, they'd lose their Medicaid, and they wouldn't get the medical treatment and stuff that they needed, and hire people like Sylvia Rivera.
No, I definitely want to talk about that. Before we move off, though, I do want to just mention Julius quickly. In 1966, you were part of the sit-in at Julius, which was a famous sit-in protesting the laws that said the bars couldn't serve homosexuals.
The bar had already had one violation because it was under new ownership, and it wasn't the right to drink. It was freedom of assembly, because you could not have people that were homosexual, you couldn't serve them alcohol, or you couldn't allow them to gather on your premises.
You know, all the descriptions of that day, they mentioned the other 3 guys, Dick Leish, Craig Rodwell, John Simmons, and then it always says that Randy Wicker joined them later.
Yes.
Can I ask why you were late, for lack of better words?
At one point, they were saying that I was very late, but I joined them on A Street. They went to the Ukrainian. The Ukrainian center knew they were going to pull this on them and were closed.
They shut down that day.
Shut down. So they came over to West Village. I met them on A Street, and finally, desperately looking. Now we have 3 people that are demanding service, and I was one of the 2 legal witnesses. So we were a group of 5 people looking to be refused service, and we knew that Julius's was one place that they they would do this because they'd already had one incident, and if they got another arrest, it would mean they'd have to start paying off the cops like any other gay bar. Julius's was never a gay bar. It was how can I knock the place that really is one of my claims to fame?
You can just say it.
It was just a boring neighborhood bar filled with neighborhood people that stopped in on the way home for work. And yes, maybe half of them are 50. It was more like 50-50. A lot of gays were involved because it was a very gay neighborhood in those
gays
times.
liked going there, but it was not a gay bar explicitly.
Right. It was a neighborhood bar.
I mean, one of the reasons why the Julius sipping is so famous is that like the resulting lawsuit went to the Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court, right? And they said, actually, you cannot deny service to homosexuals in bars. The victory at Julius was such a big rule change for bars. How was that? What was your reaction at the time? Like, did it make you think like, okay, we've got to do something next?
What really made the difference is that after Stonewall, activists like GAA could go. They got involved taking politicians into like Old Charlie's, which was a privately owned, legitimate gay bar on the east side. There were 2 or 3 around town. And the politicians found out, hey, there's a place I can go in. They're a specialized group of people that I might be able to get interested in voting for me. And that's what really the legalization of gay bars did. It gave us the possibility of becoming a political force.
You know, we're sitting here in your apartment surrounded by pictures of Marsha P. Johnson, who lived with me for over a decade.
Right. And there was a boy who I'd seen, and I told him that I was involved in the Mattachine Society. And he said, oh, I was the president of gay youth in Baltimore at the age of 16. I said, really? And then I told him I had a shop in the Village. And he said, oh, I go to the Village all the time. I hang out with Marsha. I said, I don't think Marsha's the kind of person you should be hanging out with, Willie. You know, my impression.
Wow.
So I had an extra room, and he ended up moving in here. And he said to me one night, he said, Marsha, it's 10 degrees out, and Marsha has nowhere to sleep. Could she come here? Could she sleep on the floor in the living room? And it was this living room. And I said, well, would she steal from me? He said, oh, no, Marsha would never steal from you. And then I'm thinking, Willie, I know that you're not a thief. Why would you tell me this lie that Marsha likes to sleep on the floor? It doesn't make sense, right? She came in that night. Turned out she did like to sleep on the floor because she'd been shot in the back and had a bullet lodged near her spine that acted up when it was damp. And also, she liked to sleep on a hard floor or a hard surface because sleeping on a soft bed or something would cause her back to act up on her often. So she did like to sleep on a hard floor. And she came in that night, and she was here for over a decade after that. She couldn't come and go, and we had her where she couldn't come and go and drag. Because, and also,
why not? She couldn't come and go and drag.
Because I'm on the 10th floor of a 25-story building, and this is Hoboken. This is a small town. It was an even smaller town then.
So it wouldn't be safe, you're saying?
It would be kind of scandalous a bit. And so she'd get on the path, and he said she'd be wearing this leather jacket, and the jacket would come off and the dress would drop, and then she would get out, throw on the wig, and by the time she went from Hoboken to Christopher Street, she would have transformed from male to female, except for the fact she had these huge shoes that were construction. She had big feet, so she didn't have women's shoes that fit her. And she would go on and panhandle. I mean, after she'd been here a while, we got where she'd go in my store and use my store to put in the flowers in her hair. She'd have only $10. Go buy a big bouquet of flowers. I said, Marsha, you bought those flowers? What a waste of money. You only have $10 for the weekend. She said, oh, Mr. Wicker, these flowers are going to make me a lot of money. And she put a hairdo of flowers. They put it together. She'd go out and she'd panhandle. So she got enough for a meal. In those days, $6, $8, $10 or something. And see some queen on the street, say, how you doing? And say, not too good, Miss Marsha. You know, I haven't been turning any tricks, nothing happening today. And Marsha would give her all the money. She'd panhandle and go back to panhandle some more. Wow. She'd say, some spare change for a starving actress or a dying queen. She'd have 2 lines. Then and what today was, I guess.
Wow. I mean, with Marsha and also Sylvia Rivera, who also lived here.
Yeah.
The two of them, I mean, I can see their
But
faces.
Sylvia Rivera, I met at Marsha's funeral. We were arch enemies. I didn't like her. She was loud and obnoxious and down at GAA meetings and all. She was a pain in the neck in those days. And at Marsha's funeral, I said, we have to bury the hatchet today for Marsha. And we commenced speaking, and she was living on a gay pier, which was separate from another pier that had a mixture of drug addicts and crackheads and all that. But gay pier, they were all alcoholics.
And with Marsha and Sylvia, who both lived here, for many years, like they were more or less like forgotten. They were beginning to be forgotten, their names. But now today, like their names mean something. They are like the symbols of the trans community worldwide.
I'm behind that.
Really?
Partially.
Yeah, I was going to wonder, when did that start happening?
That happened in 2012. I got a phone call from Michael Casino. He said, I have this interview with Marsha. This tape is just dying on the shelf. I'm going to finish it up in the next 2 or 3 days. I just want to put it out there. And I said, I have all sorts of leads and things I can tell you, because I had, through the leads that I gave him, some of them are still there. And so he took the interview with Marsha and spliced in all this stuff. And at some point, I said, what are you going to do with this? And finally, we had an opening at IFC, and I sat there hearing that audience begin to laugh, and I began to cry. They called us up afterwards, and they said, was Marsha P. Johnson a saint? And I said, she was a saint.
And as long as gay people have their rights all across America, there's no reason for celebration. That's how come I've been walking for gay rights all these years instead of riding cars and celebrating everything. Because you never completely have your rights, one person, until you all have your rights. And I figure as long as there's one gay person that has to walk for gay rights, Don, all of us should be walking for gay rights.
And so that was the turning point when she
and
started
that is what
to
did
be
it.
remembered.
That movie, pay it no mind on YouTube.
With her becoming this like worldwide symbol, Marsha, how do you think she would have reacted to that?
She would have thought it was a real hoot. She would have laughed. I just, it's so funny because she absolutely deserved all the praise that she gets. She was absolutely, everyone said she was the poorest person they knew and the happiest person they knew. I'd give her a big brooch. It was like a $50 deco brooch, but it was missing a stone or two, so I got it for like $5 or something, $10. I'd give it to Marsha. Marsha would wear it out, and some little queen would say, oh, Marsha, that brooch is so beautiful. Oh, you like it? She'd just give it away. I bought her a fur coat, a rabbit fur coat once, and she wore it out. Some queen said, oh, that fur coat is so cute. Rabbit, and really it was a coat that was worth $150 or something. She gave it away. The only thing she liked was this one ratty, decayed fur coat, mink fur coat, and she endlessly sewed on it. And it was endlessly tearing. And finally, the police tore it off her back when some cold night out on the West Side Highway, that's finally the way it met its end.
Wow. Was she a good roommate?
Oh, she was wonderful. She knew exactly. I was once sitting here very depressed because a friend told me his family was living with me. He was sort of my mistress while my lover was dying of AIDS. And he was my decorator. He worked in the store. Really close to Marsha, too. And he told me I was going to be invited to Thanksgiving dinner, so I'd got all these crumb cakes and all, but they never called to invite me. And I was really feeling depressed. I'm just sitting here, literally right in this location. And Marsha walked over, and she said, Jesus loves me, how do I know? Because the Bible tells me so. And I went from being in the pits to being laughing my head off. I mean, I never had such a uplifting. It was like I was in a moonshot or something.
So she did that to make you laugh?
Yes, she had a way of reading people and knowing just, she was so incisive, and she was the greatest blessing in my life.
And so tell me this, when did you You were, fighting for like gay civil rights and the movement. When did you see the movement start to expand to include trans people?
Well, Sylvia, she was calling people from Delaware and Philadelphia and Boston, saying she was going to have a march specifically for trans rights.
What year was this?
That was around 1998 or 9. So she pulled it off. It was about 150 people showed up. They marched down Broadway to Foley Square. I had to take a cab to catch up with them. So I went with her on that march. She called herself a revolutionary.
We often talk about how like fast things have changed in the country for LGBTQ people.
Yes.
Has it felt fast to you?
At one point, I tell you where it felt the fastest was how quickly gay marriage, because back in the beginning, I have a video of where you go down to the marriage bureau to take it over to throw a party for John Waterwitz and another person. They're having gay weddings. And they said, we don't want to be discussing gay marriage because the early activists, we don't want to be cookie-cutter heterosexuals. We're going to create our own institutions. We're going to create our own mores and whatever. And but that changed very slowly because the assimilationists, what it really boiled down to, what it boils down, assimilationists, what it boils down to? It boils down to, are you willing to accept the rules or the general guidelines of our society and behave like other civilized people? And if you do, we'll cut you a fair deal and include you in our society. And that's what happened.
Thank you for spending so much time talking. This has been fantastic.
Anytime.
And that is Randy Wicker. Now, if you want to check out more about Randy's been working with the archivist Devlin Camp, and they've been creating a really tremendous online archive of Randy's work. So a lot of it has been digitized by Devlin, and you can check out all of that at their website. There is a link to that in our show notes, but that website is Queer Serial, SERIAL, queerserial.com/Randy Wicker. And then as always, if you want to help support the work we do here, Substack really is the best place to do that. We've been recording these histories since 2016, so that's 8, 9, 10, 22 years, I think now. My math might be wrong, but if you want to help us continue for the next 22 years, Substack really is the number one way to help ensure that. So thank you so much to everyone who has joined us there. And if you want to find out more about our Substack, there is, again, a link in our show notes. All right, that is it from me today. I'm Jeffrey Masters. I'm on Instagram at JeffMasters1. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.